Many times I have heard words about the United States of America. It is an international policeman who, to the joy of some and the irritation of others, flies around the world, punishes, pardons, or saves someone. I've often been told that the United States has to do this because once you've started doing it, now without a country with a club, everything will fall apart. What always surprised me was that those who said the United States is obliged to save them from their problems never addressed the question of why, in fact, the United States would need this. Why would they need it? I understand why our guys and girls have to die for someone else, and why their parents have to pay for this help. We were told that we had to fight so that small countries wouldn't fall under the influence of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Well, now it's China, and we have to give financial aid to dictators so they don't start getting the same or even more financial aid from our enemies. United States policy has long since moved away from defending the country and promoting the goals and ideas of our society, from promoting, so to speak, explanations, what is called marketing advertising. Yes, this policy either bribed or forcibly retained allies, and as a result, the entire NATO bloc stopped pursuing its own policy and defense, which is basically what it was created for, knowing that the United States would protect them. By the way, the same thing happened with Ukraine, whose leadership was deceived when they were told that the United States and the United Kingdom would protect them from Russia in exchange for nuclear weapons. And that's why the country doesn't need to prepare an army at all, develop its military industry, or anything like that. Instead of economic partnerships and connections, the United States began to treat its friends and allies as subordinates and dependent regimes, which is exactly what happened. And these regimes themselves decided to take advantage of the fact that national defense was almost free and use the freed-up resources to bribe their populations. You vote for me, and I think I'll give you a lot of free sausage for it. And then Trump looked at this.
But with the drastic changes in the Trump administration, in the United States national security strategy, and its very role in the world, the quote says the document on United States foreign policy priorities sounds like a retreat. The United States no longer supports the world order, like Atlas did. The message to United States allies is that they, quote, should take primary responsibility for their regions and make a much greater contribution to our collective defense.
And it's impossible to disagree with that. But the devil, as they say, is in the details.
And others. America's priorities in Ukraine now are to quickly end the war and restore relations with Moscow. I quote, restore strategic stability with Russia. Pay attention for Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others. The document says that America's reasons for focusing on the Middle East will take a back seat. This is quite a big change. And, trying to impose the Make America Great Again agenda on Europe, the Trump administration warns Europe that it must sharply reduce immigration. Or else, quote, it will face civilizational erasure due to migration from non-European countries.
Trump always says out loud what others might be thinking but keeps silent about. Israel and the Arabs, settle your own issues, and let's not count on America rushing in to help. Solve your tasks and problems relying on your own strength. The United States helped make the first steps of the Abraham Accords happen. Now it's up to you, Ukraine and Russia. You need to stop the bloodshed. We brought you to the negotiating table and gave you a plan for how to end this bloodshed. We even offered guarantees for 10 years we won't give anymore. If you don't want them, deal with it yourselves. Europe, that's enough. Stop trying to become a caliphate. You're just relentlessly striving for it. But it's your business to defend. However, we won't defend a caliphate, not from Russia or anyone else. We were in an alliance with European countries of a culture similar to ours. If you move into the category of Indonesia, handle your own affairs or do it with Indonesia's help. General Mesley Clark, who once commanded NATO forces during the time when America considered itself the planet's policeman, he continues to have the same thoughts, so get acquainted with them. The same thoughts he had before.
First of all, I think this is very much in line with the actions and statements of the Trump administration, so I don't think this came as a surprise. The world is now transactional. We've reverted to spheres of influence. This sacrifices the magic of America. For 250 years, America has lived by the dream that we gave to all of humanity, and we've always been a radical power. We believed others should work to share democracy and freedom's benefits, and we acted to protect that.
The United States during the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century tried to impose democracy in Islamic countries or in African tribal structures. It gave billions, bribing the leadership and demonstrating by military means, that is, punishing by military means those who tried to slip away. But Clark believes that this is the best strategy, even though it hasn't solved anything all this time and has only made the situation in the world worse. But he doesn't know any other way.
This withdrawal from the world, as it seems to me, is a smaller, weaker America. And Jim, I wonder why. Because somewhere in this document, it kind of states that we can't afford it. But at the same time, the document claims that we're a great shining nation. We're so great. So why can't we afford it? Are we really not handling our financial responsibilities?
I'm really interested to hear from the general that we have the means to continue building order in the world. He completely forgot about the $38 trillion in debt. By the way, every year we borrow $1 trillion, we borrowed $1 trillion, and we give it back as interest payments, basically a scam. So we spend another $1 trillion a year on fighting poverty here in the United States. And we've already spent almost $25 trillion since the time of Lyndon Johnson, who started this anti-poverty program. The poverty rate is exactly at the same level, but according to the general, we have the money to rule the whole planet, even if we borrow that money from China. Clark demands to raise taxes on us, He hasn't earned a penny in his life. We paid him to protect us. We have to dominate the world. We need to have 800 bases. We have to keep an eye on everyone. We have to increase our presence on every continent. Trump, by the way, suggests reviving what's called the Monroe Doctrine. That is, first of all, the Western Hemisphere, and the Caribbean is declared the main zone of United States influence, where neither China nor Russia should enter. Well, they may visit, but they shouldn't establish themselves there in order to threaten us. Hence the focus on increasing military potential, probably presence in Latin America and the Caribbean. They use various slogans there like fighting drugs, mass migration, stopping cartels, but the essence is the same. Approaches to the United States are under United States control. We kick the Chinese out of the Panama Canal on both sides, from the ports, both where they enter and where they exit. America, according to Trump's idea, is becoming a fortress, and at the same time, America is completely abandoning the idea of building democracy around the world. Trump believes it's up to the nations themselves, and your humble servant also thinks it's up to them to decide how to live. We shouldn't interfere in others' affairs, and you shouldn't interfere in ours. This concept is close to me. I've expressed it many times. Don't treat others in ways you wouldn't want to be treated. That's important. This is what you might call an ancient Hebrew idea, expressed about 2,000 years ago by Rav Gilel in the 1st century before Common Era, that is, 100 years before Jesus Christ. And Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he rephrased it a bit, saying, "Go and do what you would want others to do for you." Well, for me personally, yes. By the way, it seems that Trump also, even though he's a Christian and I'm Jewish, prefers Hillel's version over Christ's. And Jesus' idea is similar to Bush's idea, or rather, Bush's idea is similar to Jesus Christ's. So going to Iraq and establishing democracy means just doing it. You assume I believe democracy is the best, so I'll go to Iraq to set it up. Trump's idea is to leave Iraq and everyone else alone, and also not to let those others, interfere and try to reshape our American way of life. Across Europe, Trump just a basic idea, which I've repeated many, many times, nothing new he's quoting. In fact, from my point of view, the same Torah, maybe you don't even know it yourself, it does that. So, in Aramaic, in Aramid, it sounds like this. Telechem ve'ezorecha, which means if you fight, then I will help you. But if you don't fight accordingly, then don't count on me. Europe is slowly turning, spinning into a caliphate and is ceasing to be an ally. In it already. De facto. They killed freedom of speech. If they haven't killed it completely, they've seriously crippled it, and other freedoms as well. J.D. Vance talked about this regarding England, for example, Germany, and other countries. If Europe doesn't stop at the edge of this abyss, we won't defend it. Who are we supposed to defend it from? From Indonesia. Regarding Ukraine, the United States will no longer wait for Ukraine to admit that it can't drive Russia out of its territory. Ukraine's task, as we view it, not as Ukrainians themselves do, is to create a viable space by combining the cessation of hostilities with an attempt to restore the strategic balance on the European continent. That came out a bit complicated, but let me try one more time. First, stop the war, violence, and shooting immediately. Second, everyone in Europe should sit together and reach an agreement. How not to scare each other, how not to conquer each other, how to make it so that you all don't fear or frighten each other, and so on. The United States promises Russia for the second time that NATO will not move eastward. The first promise was given to Gorbachev by the Reagan administration in exchange for the withdrawal of Soviet troops from East Germany. They said, not a single centimeter will we move from German territory towards you. Everything is settled. Yeah, so how much is there? I've mentioned this before. 15 or 16 countries, can't recall exactly, were added, but not a single centimeter changed, yet 15 countries joined. The main thing in Trump's doctrine is stability in the region. Before Stevenut and in the European region, right now I'm still talking about them, achieved first of all by stopping migration and secondly by stopping the war with China. Economic counteraction is proposed, meaning normal competition, struggle, and stopping its geographical expansion. We really don't like that they're building up islands there and keep talking about how they're going to seize Taiwan. If you act according to fair trade principles, we will do the same with you. If not, we will punish you. Mutually beneficial ties remain and naturally are encouraged. Why not? So the United States, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and other Asian countries are encouraged to build economic independence from China. That is, to diversify suppliers and buyers. Trump writes that the United States will intervene in other countries' affairs only if direct United States interests are involved. They bombed our embassy, pardon me, yes, or our ship was sailing, so to speak, and it was attacked and blown up. For Ukraine, this means a reduction in aid, or maybe even a halt, and a shift of the United States' focus from solving Ukraine's problems to establishing stability in Europe. For Ukraine, this means losing territory, limiting its army, giving up on NATO, and having its security depend on basically fragile guarantees from the United States and the West. How many Russian archives were seized? Nearly $300 billion will be used for Ukraine's reconstruction. I've already explained how it's divided into two parts and so on. So, if the European Union or some European countries decide to fight, to continue, yes, with Russia, like let the Americans leave, and we then will use Ukrainian troops, our money, our anti-terrorist operation. The United States washes its hands of it, and in the event of an attack by Russia, and naturally a retaliatory attack by Russia on these countries, it does not consider itself obligated to help Europe, because this is no longer a surprise attack. This is practically, as they say, you started it then according to the Trump Doctrine. Yes, our closest neighbors, Latin America, are becoming more important to us than Eastern Europe, even the South. And why is that the case with East Asia? Am I saying? Even because previously under Trump 45, the concept was, so to speak, generally directed toward the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Neighboring countries will be encouraged to trade with us and will be punished for projects if they do them with China and Russia. Latin Americans will be able to supply goods to the United States that the United States has imposed high tariffs on, mainly Chinese goods. That means they are given a huge, amazing opportunity to sell us the same things that China sells, and even, so to speak, at prices higher than what the regular Chinese offer. But by imposing tariffs on China, we allow them to get into our market as a result of the reorientation and trade wars with China. Of course, Mexico will benefit, Argentina will benefit, Guatemala, El Salvador, and possibly partly Brazil, although Brazil has its own problems. If they can replace Chinese aircraft components, electronics, and part of the light industry. And the countries that will be seriously affected, those connected with China, are Venezuela, Cuba, Peru, Chile, and Nicaragua. I don't remember further. Or maybe everyone will get poorer simply because they'll be cut off from the American market. By the way, Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia are already benefiting, as well as Indonesia, since they've started supplying goods similar to those from China. China gets 40-50% tariffs, while others have just 10%. The universal 10% threshold is accepted by all. So without high tariffs, they started bringing goods to us, the same Chinese goods, and began to undercut, so to speak, China. And we won't go back to China. We're satisfied with these suppliers.
The president just unveiled a new national security strategy, which is much more Make America Great Again than Pax Americana. These are America's top foreign policy priorities globally. First, it says that the United States will no longer support the whole world like Atlas, meaning the United States is no longer the world's policeman.
White House representatives met again today in Miami with Ukrainian officials to discuss Trump's proposed peace plan for Ukraine. This was their 7th meeting in 2 weeks, including a session last Sunday attended by Secretary of State Mark Rubio. The State Department said they reached an agreement on a key issue, a peacekeeping agreement for post-war Ukraine. The administration's national security strategy published this week states that ending the war is a key interest of the United States. To prevent unintended escalation or expansion of the war and to restore strategic stability with Russia. The document, approved by Congress, reflects changes in the positions of previous administrations, including Mr. Trump's first term. Earlier, I spoke with Matthew Kroenig, Vice President and Senior Director at the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, Atlantic Council. He helped draft similar strategic documents under Presidents George W. Bush, Obama, and during Mr. Trump's first term.
I think overall it was a good document with its pros and cons. So the strengths, a good strategy should talk about what's new and different. And this document did that by focusing on the Western Hemisphere. It also had new ideas for new challenges, like how the United States can maintain technological leadership. Those were the strengths. As for weaknesses, I think it underestimated democracy and human rights, which I see as a mistake. It was probably too critical of our European allies, and I think it also underestimated the challenges from authoritarian rivals like China.
You are now at the Reagan Defense Forum, and I suppose there are representatives from Europe there. What are you hearing from them or others at the forum about this document?
Yes, opinions on the document differ. One European ambassador I spoke with last night said that this now seems to be a consistent message after J.D. Vance's tough speech at the Munich Security Conference. And so it would be irresponsible for a European official not to question America's commitment to Europe and not to consider how Europe might have to go its own way. Thank you.
Everyone understood. We are told that basically Trump got tired of always having to be involved, having to intervene. It turns out the participants in your games, your wars, they are your wars, not ours. Matthew Crony, whom you just saw, is an advocate of telling sweet lies in international, relations. I don't know how he behaves with his wife, but I prefer it this way, thank you. Real goals and objectives that are stated directly. We care about our own country first and foremost, and I don't understand why that should be hidden. Yes, guys, we care about our country, and we won't let it be robbed anymore or dragged into your problems and wars. By the way, there's no more forest ranger with a club, or even with a shotgun. He doesn't run around the forest anymore. Solve your problems based on your own capabilities. Thank you.
Yesterday evening, the White House released a report on the national security strategy. What did you find important?
Well, this is very important. Bill, this is the main document that will determine all the defense decisions we're going to discuss here today. What has changed? This is basically Trump's version of the Monroe Doctrine, which started with James Monroe in 1823, which is really more focused on the Western Hemisphere and the malign influence in the Western Hemisphere, and warns any potential adversaries against taking action in the Western Hemisphere. This is a major shift from previous national security strategies, including Trump's first term, which were more focused on great power competition. On the pivot to Asia, on Beijing and Moscow, now the focus is on the Caribbean, Latin America, and China is mentioned, but not Beijing specifically. This reduces the intensity and tone. On China, I think it clearly states we'll maintain the status quo in Taiwan. The Middle East is mentioned little, very little. It says that ending the war in Ukraine and preventing it from spreading to Europe is in the national interest of the country, but the tone towards Russia and Putin is very mild.
So Pete Hegseth, the Minister of Defense, will be here on Saturday. Lucas Tomlinson will interview him, and we'll see what he has to say. David, how would you comment on that?
Look, this is an extremely important time for the country. The threat environment is very complex and dynamic. Our Reagan Institute poll shows that Americans generally support active United States engagement in the context of peace through strength. As Jen notes, focusing on the Western Hemisphere is important. We see that drug and migration issues are key concerns the administration has been dealing with, so it makes sense. The national security strategy also mentions reindustrialization. It's an important topic for the administration at the Defense Forum.
We've been coming here together for over 10 years now. I think the numbers from your survey are higher than I could actually remember. Take a look at this. The world is more likely to be peaceful when the United States has the strongest military. 71% of the Americans you surveyed agree with that. David, what does that say?
Listen, when you consider all this debate, what stands out if you follow mainstream or official media? Americans generally believe that the most important role of the government is to protect them, and they want a strong military and powerful national security to ensure their safety.
Jen, here's another one. Which country do you see as the biggest United States threat? I'm guessing you'd say China? I think the number for Russia is higher than many might think. China had 48%, Russia had 26%.
I think it was significant to see how many Make America Great Again Republicans wanted the United States to show leadership and stay engaged in the world.
So, gentlemen, the United States is shifting its focus from the Middle East, Asia, and Europe to Latin America. Perhaps some military bases will be relocated from all these regions to the Western Hemisphere, and defense will be built from Greenland through Canada, Alaska, and down to the Panama Canal. This will be our defense belt. The countries of the continent will be protected from the presence of outright adversaries. This is China, and possibly Russia, which at the same time continue to trade with these countries, but by diversifying suppliers and entering their markets. We won't let the Chinese import anything they want unless they let us access their markets. Europe, Russia, and Ukraine must resolve their issues independently. The same goes for the Sunnis, for Israel, Iran, which remains in the China-Russia bloc, North Korea, Venezuela, and Cuba. The anti-Shiite bloc should be contained by another anti-Shiite bloc. That's Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Israel, and so on. Nothing specific was suddenly said about Turkey and Japan, although honestly I expected it. So, of course, Turkey and Japan are mentioned, but both sides are described as strategic partners with their own commitments to defending their regions. United States of America. The growth of the industry in the past, due to the lack of production here for a long time, has happened there, in China and other places, but we will produce it too, and the development of the industry of the future, of tomorrow, along with the growth of trade exchange. In the Western, as Trump says, hemisphere, we call these unions, not caretakers. We are with Europe, Japan, Israel, and so on. Full self-sufficiency, production of necessary goods and energy, that is the task of the United States of America, both militarily and economically. Full production, complete independence is achieved here, and part of it is produced in friendly countries. That's exactly what is said, part here, part in friendly countries. We have no right to depend on unfriendly countries. The document says nothing about the influence, well, let's say the spheres of influence of China and Russia. But it seems that Russia understood from all this that it's very important to us. It doesn't have to become a sidekick to China, and Trump actually managed to pull it away from the Celestial Empire by promising it the status of a junior, but still a power, not a colony of China. Redactor. Which, of course, would have greatly strengthened China. So the same problem we've discussed here was solved differently. Russia was given the status of a power so that it wouldn't join and merge with China. I understand that this is very upsetting. So the Trump Doctrine strengthened and complemented what we call the Monroe Doctrine, and basically charted a path for the new development of the United States, the region, and essentially the world. Actions of Ukraine will directly depend on what happens now, meaning Ukraine will already feel it today. I'm saying this because by December 31, I thought all of this would be announced in Trump's speech on December 31, but it all came out 3 weeks earlier. And Ukraine will start to feel this in 3 weeks, and the others will feel it gradually. After 5 hours of negotiations in Moscow, Witkoff and Kushner left Moscow without a press conference and did not fly to Kyiv as they were supposed to, but headed home to Washington. The Kremlin stated, well, after they left, that means there is no compromise. Well, they didn't reach one, yes. In other words, Russia does not want to follow the path that Europe has outlined with Ukraine, changing the United States plan. I don't know what the reaction is to the unchanged United States plan, but a few days ago, the Kremlin seemed to say, in my opinion, Putin himself said that this is a basis for possible negotiations, meaning he agreed that something could be built on this going forward. But now I don't know what will happen. So the Americans are taking a pause to decide, in accordance with the new doctrine, whether they should continue negotiations or to say, guys, that's it, you're on your own, thank you. Well, it won't be said like that. Intense discussions are expected now. People in Europe and Ukraine are likely nervous. And I don't know. Okay, let's do this. Let's wait and see how things unfold, because I'm sure that by the end of this week, we'll know something about where all this is heading. Goodbye.